Hi, welcome to my video on hyperbola in relation to its co-vertices, conjugate axes, and the lengths of the transverse axis and the conjugate axes. We have an equation which is in transformational form, and notice we have an x squared and a y squared with a plus and a minus, so we have a hyperbola. So the center of this hyperbola is h, comma, k, which is the opposite of the negative h. Whatever this value is here, this one is always opposite. And whatever this value is here, this one is opposite. The transverse axis, because the x is positive, is horizontal. And the vertices are h and k, but because it's horizontal, it's plus or minus the a values. And that means that the co-vertices are, we have an h and a k, so the co-vertices are, we add the plus or minus b to the k value. So the vertices are on the transverse axis, and the conjugate axis, and I didn't mention that, is vertical. So whatever the transverse axis is, then the converse axis is, one is horizontal, the other one is vertical. So this is horizontal, this one is vertical. If this one was vertical, this one would be horizontal. And because it's vertical, then the values of b are added to the k. Because it's horizontal, the values of a are added to the h, which is the x, and this is the y. The length of the axis, transverse axis, because it's horizontal, is 2 times a, and vertical is 2 times b. So let's do some examples. I have example 1 here. X squared over 4 minus y squared over 9 equals 1. Transformational form, x is positive, y is negative, x squared, y squared. We have a hyperbola. Center, notice there's no brackets, and we have a 0 and a 0. The transverse axis, because x is positive, is horizontal. That means the conjugate axis is vertical. And the vertices are, we have a 0 and a 0. And because it's horizontal, I got to work out what a is. A squared is 4. A squared is below the x squared. So a is plus or minus 2. B squared is 9. B squared is right here. And b is plus or minus 3. So what we have the 0, 0. But because it's horizontal, the values of a are added to the x. And because we got 0, 0 center, the co-vertices are the values of b added to the y value. So that makes 0 plus 2 is 2, comma 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2, comma 0. And the co-vertices are 0. And 0 plus 3 is 3. And we have a 0 for the x. And 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And the length is 2 times horizontal axis, is 2 times a. So it's a is 2, so it's 2 times 2, so the length is 4. The conjugate axis is 2 times b. B is 3. And we have a 6. So that's one example. Now let's do an example when the center is not 0, 0. So we have a hyperbola again. We have a plus and a minus. We have x squared right here. We have a y squared, so we have hyperbola. So the center is the opposite of negative 1 is 1. Opposite of plus 6 is a minus 6. The transverse axis, again, because the x is positive and y is negative, transverse axis is horizontal. And the conjugate axis is the vertical. Again, one is horizontal, one is vertical. The vertices, the center is 1 and negative 6. Because it's horizontal, I didn't work out the values of a again. So a squared is 25. So a is plus or minus 5. B squared is 16. So b is plus or minus 4. So the values of A are added because it's horizontal. It's plus or minus 5. That means I have 1 plus 5 is 6, minus 6. And I have 1 minus 5 is negative 4, minus 6. The co-vertices are, again, the center is 1, negative 6. But the values of B are added this time, so it's plus minus 4. So we got 1, negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. And we have a 1 for the x. And we have a negative 6 minus 4, which is negative 10. And the length is horizontal, so the length of the transverse axis is 2a, and a is 5. So the length is 10. A is 5, the length is 10. And the vertical axis, so it's 2 times b. B is 4. So the length of the conjugate axis is 8. Okay, that's dealing with when we have the transverse axis is the horizontal. What about if the transverse axis is the vertical? So we have the hyperbola again with a plus and a minus, and we have the square on the y and the x. So we have hyperbola. The center is still opposite of h. Negative h is h. Opposite of negative k is k. Again, if this is positive, this will be a negative. And if this is a negative, this will be a positive. So whatever these signs are here, it'll be the opposite, going in for the center. Again, the y is positive, so the transverse axis is the vertical. And so that means the conjugate axis must be the horizontal. And the vertices is still, we have an h and a k. But the vertices lie on the transverse axis, so this is a plus or minus b. And this is an h and a k, so the co-vertices are added plus or minus a. Again, the transverse axis, the vertices lie on the transverse axis, and because its transverse axis is the y, the vertical, then the b is added to the y value, which is the k, and reverses here. The length of the transverse axis, because it's vertical, is 2 times b. And the length of the conjugate axis is horizontal, so it's 2 times a. So horizontal has the a, the vertical has the b. So let's do some examples. Again, the center here, we have no brackets, so the x is 0 and the y is 0, no brackets. The transverse axis, because the y is positive and the x is negative, the transverse axis is vertical. That means the conjugate axis is horizontal. The vertices are, center is 0, 0. So that means because it's vertical, then, oh, I forgot to get the values of a again. So a squared is 100. A is plus or minus 10. B squared is 81. And B is plus or minus 9. Again, A is with the x, B is with the y. So because it's vertical, then the b is added to the y value plus or minus 9. So x is 0 in each case, and 0 plus 9 is 9, 0 minus 9 is negative 9. And the co-vertices, the center is 0, 0, but horizontal is the a values, so it's plus or minus 10. So that's 0 plus 10 is 10, comma 0. 0 minus 10 is negative 10, comma 0. And it's the vertical axis, so this is a 2b. So b is 9, so 2 times 9, 18. And horizontal axis is 2 times a, so a is 10, so 2 times 10 is 20. Now we have the same hyperbola in that we have vertical, but this time we have the center is not 0, 0. The center is opposite of negative 5 is 5. The opposite of a plus 2 is a minus 2. The transverse axis, because the y is positive, is vertical. That means the conjugate axis is horizontal. And the vertices, the center is 5, -2. Because it's vertical, I forgot to get the a again. And the b. So a squared is 64. So a is plus or minus 8. B squared is 36. So b is plus or minus 6. So vertical, so it's added to the y value as plus and a minus 6. So 5 is the x value for each vertex. And -2 plus 6 is 4. -2 minus 6 is -8. And the co-vertices, again, the center is 5, -2. But because it's horizontal, the values of a are added to the x. So it's plus or minus 8. So 5 plus 8 is 13 minus 2. 5 minus 8 is a -3 minus 2. And because it's vertical, the length of the vertical axis is 2b. B is 6. That gives us 12. And horizontal axis is 2 times a. And so a is 8. 16. So hopefully you can see that the transverse axis and the conjugate axis are one is vertical and one is horizontal. And now I have an extra question here. It says find each below for the hyperbola. But this time I have the equation written in general form. So we have fractions. So I say the LCD is 4, 8, 2, 2. So the LCD is 8. So we'll multiply each term by 8. What I do is I eliminate the fractions. It makes it easier. So when I'm solving the equation, I eliminate the fractions. So every term is multiplied by 8. 4 and 8 goes 2, so I get 2x squared. 8 divided into 8 is 1, so I get a negative y squared. 2 divided into 8 is 4, so I get a negative 4 root 2x. 8 times 1 is 8. 2 into 8 goes 4. 4 times 7 is a negative 28. And 0 times 8 is 0. So now I have a better equation to solve rather than deal with the fractions. So I can only do this when I have an equation. Now I put it in a descending order in terms of x. I do the x's first, then I do the y's, and I move my negative 28 to the right side to make it positive. And I'll factor to complete the square, so I'll factor out the 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and negative 4 root 2 divided by 2 is a negative 2 root 2. And here I'll take out the negative, because I want the square term to be positive, so I'll take the negative out. So negative divided by negative is a positive. 8 divided by negative 1 is negative 8, equals 28. So now I'm ready to make it a perfect square trinomial. So what I do, very quickly, I just take half of this term. So half of this term, so negative root 2 over 2 divided by 2 is, I take a half and square. So that's root 2 squared. So root 2 times root 2 is 2. And the negative times negative is positive. And right here, a half of negative 8. So I take the negative 8, I take a half of it, and I square it. So that's negative 4 squared. So that becomes 16. Now when I put the 2 here, I have to balance it. So 2 times 2 makes it 4. And negative 1 times 16 is a negative 16. So factor that. I have 2. That's an x. It's perfect square trinomial. So you take the square root of this term. You take a half of this coefficient, which is a negative root 2 squared. Take square root of y squared is y. Half of negative 8 is a negative 4 squared. And this gives me 32 minus 16 is 16. Now I divide all parts of the equation by 16. This gives me transformational form. This is a 1. This is a y minus 4 squared over 16. And this gives me x minus root 2 squared. 2 divided into 16 is 8. So now we have the transformational form. When we have the transformational form, then find all the information. The center is the opposite of a negative root 2, which is root, I almost made that a negative root 2 then. The opposite of a negative root 2 is root 2. Opposite of a negative 4 is a 4. Because the x is positive and y is negative, the transverse axis is horizontal. That means the conjugate axis is vertical. The vertices, let's see what the vertices are. The center is root 2 and 4. So, let's look at the A. So, the A squared is 8. So that means A is equal to plus or minus the root of 8. So, the square root of 8 is the square root of 4 times 2. So that's a 2 root 2. Square root of 4 is 2. The other 2 stays in. And b squared is 16. So b squared is 16. So b is plus or minus 4. So I have found the A and I found the B. So there's the vertices. Now I have to add, because it's horizontal, I add the A value, which is plus or minus 2 root 2 to the x. And so one of them, let's get one of the vertices, is root 2 plus 2 root 2 is 3 root 2 comma 4. Root 2 subtract 2 root 2 is a negative root 2 comma 4. And the co-vertices are, again, the center is root 2 and 4. And the co-vertices is vertical, so the values of b are added to the y value, plus or minus 4. So we have root 2, 4 plus 4 is 8, and the other co-vertex, as co-vertex is root 2, and 4 minus 4 is 0. Again, horizontal, vertical, so the co-vertex is vertical, so the values are added, the values of b are added to the y value. And the vertices lie on the transverse axis horizontal, so the values of a are added to the x value. The length, horizontal, so this is a 2a. And a is 2 root 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, so it's 4 root 2. And the vertical axis, so this is, that's a 2a, this must be 2b. b is 4, so this gives us 8. So, again, a general form, change it to transformational form to pick up all the information. And all this information you can do when you go to graph. We'll do a graph, one of these in a later video. So that brings us to the end. If you like my video, click on the like button. If you're not a subscriber, click on the subscribe button. Visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. That's the content that I have on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Thank you for viewing my video. Hope the video was of some help to you. Bye-bye.